In the village of Obalende, there lived a wicked man named Agemo. He was known far and wide for his cruelty and evil ways. The villagers of Obalende feared him greatly because wherever he went, trouble would follow. Agemo took pleasure in causing others pain. He would steal from the poor, harm innocent people, and create chaos. He rarely smiled, but whenever he smiled, it was not because he was happy. It was simply because he was thinking of something wicked. The villagers tried to avoid him, and they always spoke in low tones when talking about him. Agemo had a way of knowing when someone spoke negatively of him, and those who did often found themselves in deep trouble. One evening, just as the sun was setting, the people of Obalende gathered in the market square. They had finished their day's work and were ready to go home. The smell of roasted corn filled the air and children laughed as they played. But suddenly, a heavy silence fell over the market square. Agemo had just arrived. Agemo was not feared for his evil deeds alone. He had a scary appearance that made people shiver just by looking at him. He was the tallest man in the village, and his body was strong like the bark of a tree. His skin was dark, and his eyes were sharp but never showing any kindness. Agemo walked slowly into the market square, looking at the people with cold eyes. His scary physique matched his evil heart. Mothers quickly pulled their children close, and the traders hurried to pack up their goods. Agemo walked straight to Iyashade, the bread seller. She was an old woman who was kind to everyone. She often gave bread to those who did not have money to pay, but Agemo did not like that. With one swipe of his hand, Agemo knocked over a table and all the loaves of bread fell to the ground. Iyashade was shocked and she quickly knelt to pick up the bread. "Why do you give away bread for free? Do you think you are better than the rest of us?" Agemo asked angrily. Iyashade looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "I just wanted to help those who are hungry, sir. I did not mean any harm, sir." Agemo laughed mockingly. "Help? You think you can help anyone? You are just a useless old woman. Let the people starve. They should learn to take care of themselves. If you ever help anyone again, I will have you locked up," Agemo said as his voice echoed through the market square. He pushed Iyashade hard and she fell to the ground, crying out in pain. The people in the square stood still, too scared to move and too scared to help. Agemo looked around after being satisfied with the fear he had caused. He turned and walked away, leaving Iyashade on the ground, and her loaves of bread were scattered around her. Agemo's house was on the edge of the village. The house was surrounded by thick bushes, and no one dared to go near it because Agemo practiced dark magic and kept strange, mysterious objects inside his home. However, Agemo was not living alone. He lived with 7 wives, though there were no children in his home. Agemo's first wife had been married to him for several years, but when she did not give birth, he decided to marry a second wife, hoping for a child. But still, there were no children. One by one, Agemo took more wives, marrying a third, a fourth, until he had 7 wives in total. But no matter how many wives he married, the house remained quiet, without the laughter or cries of a baby. Agemo did not win his wives with love or kindness. Instead, he forced them to marry him. He sought out the daughters of the poorest families in the village, knowing that they had little choice. Agemo paid their parents huge amounts of money and food supplies that they could not refuse. These parents, who were also desperate and unable to say no, handed over their daughters to Agemo even though they knew of his wickedness. This was something that made the villagers whisper and gossip behind his back. Who would believe that even with all his dark powers, Agemo cannot bring forth a child into his own home? What a shame! I only pity his wives, a villager whispered. It is because of his evil ways that no children are coming to him. His wickedness must have put a curse on his house, making it barren. Another villager mocked him. The strange objects he kept inside his house are to blame, or maybe the dark magic he is practicing has suddenly turned against him. Another villager said in a low tone. The 7 wives lived in the shadow of Agemo's wickedness, fearful of his temper and his strange ways. They knew that he was unhappy without children, and that this made him even more bitter and angry. All his power and wealth could not give him the one thing he seemed to want the most, a child of his own. But then, something changed. Agemo married an 8th wife, a young woman named Foluke. Just like the other wives, Foluke's parents were too poor to refuse Agemo's offer. She was very beautiful, but there was sadness in her eyes as she was led to Agemo's house. Unlike the other wives, Foluke soon became pregnant, and when the time came, she gave birth to a baby boy. For the first time in many years, the cries of a baby echoed through Agemo's house. The villagers were surprised. They had expected Agemo to remain childless as a punishment for his evil deeds. Some even began to wonder what kind of a father Agemo would turn out to be. However, Agemo was really excited. He named his son Ayomide, believing that this boy would grow up to be powerful like him and that his dark legacy would continue through his son. As Ayomide grew up, he was not like other children. He had a fierce look in his eyes, and there was something unsettling about him that made the villagers uncomfortable. His eyes would glow in the dark, and when he looked at Agemo, it was as if he could see right through him. The boy rarely spoke, but whenever he did, his words were sharp and filled with wisdom far beyond his age. One night, Agemo woke up to a strange feeling. He opened his eyes slowly, only to find his son standing at the foot of his bed, staring at him with those glowing eyes. The boy didn't say a word, but his silence was more frightening. Agemo, who had never feared anything, now became scared. He tried to speak, but no words came out. From that night on, Agemo began to fear his own son. Ayomide seemed to have a power that even Agemo could not understand or control. After that night, strange things began to happen in Agemo's household. Sometimes, when the wives were cooking, the fires would suddenly die out no matter how much firewood was added. Objects would move without being touched, and Agemo's once strong body began to weaken. Sometimes, Agemo would hear soft whispers coming from the corners of the room, but whenever he turned to look, no one was there. At night, doors would open and slam shut by themselves, as if an invisible hand was at work. Agemo's wives, who were already living in fear of their husband, began to stay close to one another, too scared to be alone. They whispered amongst themselves that Ayomide had brought a curse into the house. Even Foluke, Ayomide's mother, was scared of her own son. Agemo's animals were not left out. They started acting strangely. The chickens stopped laying eggs, and the goats refused to eat. Even the dog stopped barking. It was as if a dark spell had been cast over the entire household. Agemo found himself helpless. He could feel his own strength slipping away, replaced by a growing fear. The more he tried to control the situation, the more things got out of his control. Ayomide's presence was slowly draining the life and power from his dark and mighty world. The villagers too sensed that the boy was different. They began to whisper amongst themselves. It is obvious that Ayomide is Agemo's nemesis, sent by the spirits to punish him for his wickedness, one villager said. You are so right. The spirits have finally turned against Agemo, using his own blood to bring about his downfall. Another villager responded. As time went on, the dark magic that Agemo had once wielded so easily began to weaken. No matter what spells he tried or rituals he performed, nothing could control his son Ayomide. The boy's strange power only grew and Agemo's fear grew too. This fear consumed Agemo. He could no longer sleep, eat, or even think clearly. The once mighty and feared man became a shadow of his former self, haunted by the presence of the child he had so desperately wanted. Agemo's strength failed him, and soon he fell terribly sick. His body grew weak, and he was tormented by strange visions and nightmares. It was during one of these sleepless nights, as Agemo lay weak and trembling in his bed, that Ayomide came to him. The boy stood at the foot of the bed. His glowing eyes were fixed on Agemo. In a voice that was calm, Ayomide revealed a truth that broke Agemo's spirit completely. I am not just your son. I am Toby, the boy who lived in Obalende before. Do you remember me? Ayomide asked. Agemo's heart began to beat faster as the memories he had long buried began to resurface. He remembered a time, a few years ago, when a young boy named Toby accidentally kicked a ball onto his roof. Agemo got very angry by Toby's mistake and he punished him severely. Toby's parents begged Agemo profusely, but Agemo refused to listen to their plea. The punishment was so severe that Toby passed away. His life was cut short by Agemo's cruelty. I was that boy. You punished me for a simple mistake, and I died because of it. But the spirits gave me another chance. I have returned, not as Toby, but as Ayomide, your own son. Ayomide continued. Agemo's eyes were widened in shock as the truth became revealed. The child he had hoped would carry on his dark legacy was in fact the soul of the boy he had unjustly punished to death. Ayomide reincarnated and returned not just to haunt Agemo, but to bring him to his knees. As Ayomide spoke, the room grew colder and Agemo felt a crushing heaviness on his chest. He then realized that his sickness, his weakening power, and the strange events in his home were all connected to Ayomide. Agemo, who was now powerless, pleaded with Ayomide to spare his life. Please, have mercy. I beg you, do not take my life. Please, forgive me. I am ready to do anything you want, but just spare my life, please. Agemo whispered and trembled as he managed to get on his knees. Ayomide stood there silently. His glowing eyes were fixed on Agemo. The room was so quiet that Agemo could hear his own heartbeat loud and fast in his chest. Finally, Ayomide spoke. You showed me no mercy when I was Toby. Now, I will show you no mercy, Ayomide said. Before Agemo could move or speak, a cold wind blew through the room, putting off the 2 candles on a small table, and the room was thrown into total darkness. Agemo tried to see through the darkness, but he saw nothing except Ayomide's glowing eyes. He tried to cry out, but no sound came. He began to find it hard to breathe. A colder breeze blew through the room. It wrapped around Agemo like a heavy blanket, squeezing the life out of him. Agemo struggled against the air, but it was no use. The last thing he saw was Ayomide's glowing eyes, cold and unblinking. As the strength faded away, in his final moments, Agemo learned that no one, no matter how powerful, can escape the consequences of their actions. Agemo finally went still. His lifeless body was on the floor. Ayomide turned away, leaving the house without looking back. The once powerful and feared Agemo was no more. And so, the story of Agemo came to a dark and fitting end. The man who had once ruled with cruelty and fear, who had shown no mercy to others, met his fate at the hands of the very darkness he had created. The village of Obalende was free at last. The villagers who had lived in fear for so long could finally breathe easily. Agemo's wives left the house and reunited with their families. The tale of Agemo became a warning to all who heard it, that the evil we do will always come back to us in one way or another. Cruelty and wickedness will never bring true power or happiness. Those who live by hurting others will one day face the consequences of their actions. The story also teaches that justice will find its way, even if it takes time. In the end, we must treat others with kindness and fairness. For what we give to the world is what the world will give back to us. Did you enjoy the story? If you did, like the video, drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel to enjoy more thrilling stories. Thank you for watching.